So I just got back from a trip to Detroit and New York. While I was going through the experience of this trip, I felt like this understanding of what creativity is really shifted for me and it felt enormous. So I want to share it with you today. If you're new, I'm Rachel, and this is the Spiritual Crypto Podcast. I normally talk about things like Vipassana meditation, astrology works its way in, dealing with narcissistic abuse if you're an adult and you grew up as, like the scapegoat kid in a narcissistic family structure. And I'm also fascinated by past lives. I've done many past life regressions, and Vipassana meditation has helped me hone my ability to look at past lives. So some of that comes in as well, particularly this past life that I think was at the fall of Atlantis. I made a whole video about it if you're interested. I'll link that here. And I actually met a stranger who verified independently that she felt she knew me at that time. And all of that ties into the larger theme of this podcast and of this YouTube channel. And I think of really my life at this point in time, especially, which is that I'm certain that there is a huge imbalance in yin and yang energies on Earth, and therefore in virtually all of us as humans, regardless of our genders. And at this point in time, I think that we're meant to heal that wounded feminine energy and the wounded masculine energy that has harmed it so that they can come into a healthy balance and humanity can ascend. I think that harkens back to the fall of Atlantis. I think the origins of this larger lesson start there. And so, yeah, I'm really convinced that there are a lot of other people out there who were probably alive at that time as well. And if that's you, please let me know, because there's so little content actually anywhere on the internet from people who have past life memories from the fall of Atlantis. And I really want to find more of us because it seems to have, I think, such an enormous resonance on this moment in history right now. And in my efforts to help bring this healthy balance of yin and yang energy to Earth and all of us humans living here, I became convinced that the economic system itself is one of the things that perpetuates this imbalance the most. We all live in this economic system. It's like the water and we're the fish. It doesn't even occur to a lot of people to question its structure. It's zero-sum nature, the way it often rewards taking and has no space for giving. That's why we have to have nonprofits in the first place. I used to be a pro Wall Street trader. I made a couple of videos about that and what I learned there about how dysfunctional the system is up close and why I therefore left. And I founded Seeds, which is a new kind of economic system that allows giving people to build wealth because you were kind, because you helped others. When you make a gift to help someone in need through Seeds, you receive 100% or more of the value of your gift in Seeds cryptocurrency in thanks. Seeds cryptocurrency is environmentally friendly. It isn't mined. And in that way, your gift doesn't cost you anything monetarily. If you give $25 to help someone, you'll receive at least $25 in Seeds in thanks. And then if and when Seeds go up in market value, you can build wealth because you were generous and kind, because you wanted to help somebody else. And a big part of the reason for that design is that I'm confident that if we have a system that actually supports giving people so that they can build wealth through the act of giving, that's going to encourage much better behavior. It's going to lend itself to making the world a better place, much more so than the old economic system, which is grounded in often zero-sum paradigms, in extraction, in taking, in reliance on workers making an hourly wage so that billionaires can take as much as possible from their labor. Seeds works to transcend that. And another important piece of that I'm going to share now is that statistically speaking, in the US at least, but I'm sure this is true in a lot of places, women give more to nonprofits, they make more donations, and women have collectively a lot less money. So within the Seeds ecosystem, we're doing our best to align with those giving women so that we can create a way for them to build wealth over time by doing something that they're already doing, which is improving this world. If you're a giving person of another gender, that's terrific. We welcome you. But while it's inclusive, I always want to make sure to speak to the contributions that women make, because that's kind of getting lost in the rhetoric of today, I think. And it's important that we speak up about it and honor it in the way that it deserves. So, relating to creativity, I love clown. I went to clown school in France and got kicked out. That's a whole other story. But I've wanted to make this feature-length narrative film about a clown for many years, and it would call in themes from the fall of Atlantis. It speaks to this idea of bringing healthy feminine energy back into balance, all of these things. And one time, it was in late 2018, I was sitting and meditating, doing Vipassana meditation, And the image for the final scene of this film just came to my mind's eye. It was just a black screen with like dots of purple light lighting up across it. The black screen we eventually see like represents the globe. Very soon after that, it was over New Year's 2019, I traveled to a Vipassana meditation course in Northern California. I was living in Southern California at the time. So I caught a ride with another meditator. It was like a 5-hour drive, and another woman joined us. And that woman was the one who independently told me that she felt she had a past life in Atlantis and that she felt like she remembered me from there. So totally check out that video if that's of any interest to you at all. It's like the thing that I'm most interested in of anything in this life, I think, because I long for it so much. Because it feels like so much about that time was better, I think, is the main reason. But I also understand that there are lessons from that experience that we're integrating that I think are going to have a huge influence in this time period right now that will allow us to get to a higher level, a more integrated level, a wider understanding than, like even what we had at that time, though it seems so much more advanced in so many ways. So I've been trying to write this film and I've run into all of these challenges, like a lot of us do, I think, when, working to express something creatively. I don't know if you've ever read the Stephen King book on writing. It's great. I recommend it. I'd read it a couple times before, and so I was looking through it again and specifically looking at his like practical recommendations regarding a writing schedule because I was struggling with a couple things. One was the format of the screenplay. It felt like I needed to translate the story into that once I knew what the story was. And I also knew that Francis Ford Coppola would sometimes write a screenplay out as though it was a short story and then translate that back into screenplay form. So I thought I could manage that. And in the book, Stephen King talks about this idea that, a book, the first draft of a book can be done and should be done in 3 months. He writes 2,000 words a day, and he writes almost every day because it's addictive to him. He talks about how the days that he doesn't write, the rare days when he doesn't write, those days are the real work. And I found that interesting. So he does 2,000 words a day. And that seems to work out to no more than like 4-ish hours a day or so on average for him. And as a side note, that makes me think that that's probably closer to what productive work weeks should be for people. It's great that we're finally seeing this shift to the 4-day work week. I think that's important. But I'm sure that there's still time wasted in that structure during which people aren't actually doing like good productive work because they're just told that they have to be focusing at that time. And for me, at least, that's never how it goes. I'll find that I'll have a bunch of energy at a certain time during the day. Maybe it's later at night. I seem to be pretty nocturnal. I don't know, just hearing that that was what worked so well for Stephen King for all these years, like essentially this 4-hour day. I think that approach is probably closer to what would be better for most people. But he says in the book that to get started, try to do 1,000 words a day. So just before I went on this trip to Detroit, New York, I started trying to do that. And I was really taking in what Stephen King says in this book. He talks about how writing is transcribing. You're bringing in these ideas, you're making yourself an open channel for your muse, and the ideas are coming from somewhere else. And of course, I've been introduced to that idea in the past. I was aware that that's what a lot of people say, that their experience of creativity is. But I don't think that mine has ever really been that. I made a film before. I made a feature documentary film. And my experience of that was that the idea just came in almost fully formed while I was sitting on the trading desk. I was a pro stock trader at the time, and I was trading the European shift, so it was like overnight. Yeah, the idea just came to me. So I guess I was channeling, but because it was a documentary, I wasn't writing it. The team and I were trying to capture, real events in people's lives. It wasn't narrative. And so I realized through this that I've never really let myself channel creatively in that way at all. I mean, not in a sort of repeated, habitual, daily way. And so I started doing this, trying to do the 1,000 words a day that Stephen King recommends before I left for this trip to Detroit and New York. And I really felt like I started to see what it is. In the first day, something showed itself to me that kind of blew my mind. This idea with the purple lights, this is what it was. This idea with the purple lights. I don't know how much I should try to go into the story of the film here, but it is about this idea of integrating what happens in Atlantis with that energy from the group that I call the attackers. Those people felt red. If you've had a past life in Atlantis and this makes any sense to you, please reach out to me and let me know. their energy felt red. And whenever I do automatic writing myself, which isn't that often, a lot of times the first line that comes out is "you are blue." And I didn't know what that meant, but I think it had to do with that life in Atlantis and something about aura and color. And in that first day, sitting down and allowing myself to transcribe creatively as I'm actually trying to write this story, trying to open myself to write this story, really in the first real way, because I was so blocked by the screenplay format before, I suddenly understood that the purple lights show that successful, healthy integration of the red and the blue. And I was just like, oh, that's what that meant all along. And I felt like that was such a good example of that thing that Stephen King is talking about, that creative people always talk about. Like, you just open yourself up to that, and then the stuff starts to come through that it's just like, oh, okay, this is what's going on. This is exciting. I didn't know this myself. I want to keep writing so that I can learn more about what's going on. And I think it freaked me out a little bit, or maybe it challenged some identity I'm holding on to, or something. Some sankara, that's the word you hear a lot at Vipassana courses, something I'm attached to that is negative about maybe fear relating to actually getting this story done and getting it out in the world. And I didn't write for several days. And in the meantime, instead of being in that healthy, feminine, creative energy that I was sort of embodying really for the first time in certain ways, like certainly as it relates to writing, I think I've been in that space to some extent before with like performing stuff. Instead of sitting in that and acquainting myself with it more so, I became super obsessed with buying a house in Detroit, Michigan. And y'all, this really, I swear, just kicked in like right as Jupiter went into Cancer, like, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago now. I'm a triple Aries, so Cancer is also my fourth house of home and mother and so forth. And I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm also a millennial. And so, there've been a lot of think pieces about how hard it is, whatever, for millennials to buy homes, blah, blah, blah. But then also, if you're an entrepreneur, the conventional mortgage system is not set up to even try to understand how your money comes in. And I'm also single. Like, that system also really wants you to be buying a house with a partner, right? So it really seemed like I was going to have to save up all of the cash to buy a house, 100%. And I tried so many other things. I mean, I literally built a tiny house with my hands a couple years ago. I made a video about it on YouTube if you feel like watching that as well. I own the land, I own the tiny house, it's on a permanent structure. It was really fun building the house and a really great learning experience. I feel like the thing that I'm worst at is sort of like spatial things relating to the rules of Earth, if that makes sense. But that was cool to learn how to do that and like gain confidence in those areas. But probably the hardest part about it was just finding help, because I didn't know anyone in the area. But beyond that, I feel that I've been confronting these energies for many years now where I can't get help. There's a lot of attack when I try. It feels like it is of these unhealthy masculine energies kind of trying to fuck with me in this way that feels like sort of a last gasp. Because I think the work that I'm doing with seeds and the work I'm doing with this film too, this is part of the larger mission too, I think, is about transcending these energies that don't want to die, right? These energies that I think Donald Trump very much embodies. We're seeing sort of demonstrations of how terrible they are, how much they don't work anymore on a global scale in different ways. I think those energies come at you. They sense that you're here to make them dissipate. So I really feel like that's a lot of what was going on, but I also had patterning from growing up in this life and stuff where I was attacked a lot, not very often physically, but emotionally and verbally and psychologically and whatever growing up with like a narcissistic parent. I was the scapegoat kid. Anyway, finding help generally has been very difficult forever, for always. So all that said, Jupiter goes into Cancer, right? And something just gets activated in me in which I decide that even though I've tried multiple times in the past and I've looked at like conventional mortgages and so forth, it just didn't seem like there was any way in hell I was ever going to qualify for that. I found this other type of lender, to my great surprise. And I'd always liked Detroit. Whenever we filmed my documentary years ago, we shot in Detroit, and I think it's a cool city. But I also realized through this trip that I just took to Detroit that I think it, specifically the suburbs, it's pretty similar. Like, the way it looks is similar. It feels similar to the place where my mom grew up, about an hour away outside of Toledo, Ohio. And going to her parents' house, it's like the only kind of happy memories I really have from childhood. So whatever sense of an idea of home that could be like kind of healthy and stuff comes from my experiences there. I think that's the real reason that I was drawn to Detroit specifically. I feel like Detroit's at this inflection point now where it would be the right time for me to look at buying if I was going to do that, because there's been revitalization in a lot of areas. There's an interesting art scene and so forth. And you can still buy like a nice house for like $200,000, which you can't do in any other major city that I know of, at least any other major American city. If you know of places where you can still do that, let me know. But that was a big part of the impetus, I think. But I wasn't conscious of that necessarily when I started looking. But then it was like because of the energies in Jupiter and Cancer were helping me. And it looked like, okay, this looks like maybe I actually can get a loan to my surprise. And I developed this great sense of urgency, which was so manufactured and made me very aware of how it's like that unhealthy masculine energetic pattern that I have so been in for so much of my life. It's related to scarcity energy. Oh man, it's just related to, there's a lot of fear in it. And it's not a creative place to be. I was aware of how unhealthy it was as I was like going through it, as I was compulsively learning as much as I could about Detroit real estate. And I was aware of how unhealthy it was because I became so obsessed. But there was also this element of it that was a relief to some extent because I've been going through eating disorder recovery too. I've talked about that in other videos on this channel. I'm like 15 months into it, a little bit more than 15 months into it now. And I'm really starting to see some big improvements. My energy is a lot better. The excess weight that I needed to put on as a healthy part of the process, it's starting to naturally come off without me making literally any effort to get this extra weight to come off. And that's been really exciting to see, that kind of obsessive energy where I would get really excited about something and like research it a lot and really dive into it and then do it. I kind of did this with the tiny house as well. It seemed like this obsession with looking at Detroit houses was a sign of kind of getting back to my previous state where I had a lot more energy before the eating disorder had taken its toll on me. So that felt like a good sign in that sense, but the addictive quality, the like driving quality, the sense that I should go and like do this or whatever, like I knew that wasn't healthy. I could feel how unhealthy it was. So I found one house though that I really liked, and I made plans to take this trip to go there to Detroit to see it. And so I went on this trip, and it was funny because like there were so many hurdles. It really did feel like something was trying to tell me like, don't actually do this. Like, don't try to push through these hurdles in the way that you would in the past. Listen to what these signs are telling you because they're trying to show you that you shouldn't buy a house in Detroit. The first sign that was kind of hilarious was that I booked this room at this super cute renovated bed and breakfast in Indian Village, which is like a nice neighborhood in Detroit. Although Detroit is also fascinating in that block to block, they can look totally different. You can have this sort of conventionally nice, quote unquote, nice neighborhood, one block, and then 2 blocks over, it looks still like bombed out and abandoned and whatever. But Indian Village is like one of their more established areas, whatever. And I just wanted to stay at this cute renovated bed and breakfast. I didn't care so much about like quote unquote safety or whatever. I mean, I've lived in a lot of places. I'm not uncomfortable with like a raw area or whatever. But when I get there, the flight was delayed. So I got there very late. When I saw that the flight was delayed, I looked on their website to see if there was like any check-in time or whatever. I didn't see any information about that. And then I get to this bed and breakfast that I prepaid for, and they fucking wouldn't let me in. It was just locked. They didn't have like a traditional lobby or anything like that. There was no way to get in. There was no way to reach anybody. I called and left a message. So I I was so tired, yo. I was so tired. And that's the other function of this. Like this unhealthy masculine energy, it so depletes you. Like that's been a big part of why I've been so tired in recent years. Like the eating disorder has been like the obvious physical cause for that. But I mean, this unhealthy masculine energy is also what led me to have an eating disorder in the first place. And I think that's true of so many other women. And I've said this before, but once I'm further along in this eating disorder recovery process, I went through this process that was not what they teach you at a lot of recovery centers, as I understand. I just listened to my body and ate everything it was telling me to eat. And that included like what they call mental hunger. The idea is that you're so physically depleted when you're in that state that your body may not even be sending you hunger signals anymore, like physical hunger signals, but you'll still think about foods. So I knew that that meant that if I thought about a certain food, it meant that my body was trying to tell me to eat it. So I did that. And for some people, when they start that process, they're literally eating 10,000 calories a day. And that sounds insane to a lot of people. In my case, it wasn't that extreme. My eating disorder symptoms had included like my hair was falling out. I'd reached a point where I was starting to gradually gain weight, even though I was still restricting and exercising a lot. So my whatever about that resistance to fatness, that was probably the biggest catalyst to get me to heal, like ironically or something, because the entire thing was about like trying not to be fat, quote unquote. And my menstrual cycle got a lot shorter than it had been my whole life. It got down to like 23 days. And it had always been like 28 days before that or whatever. So I didn't lose it completely like a lot of people do when they're really restricting hard for a long time. But things were very messed up. My hormones were all messed up and so forth. So yeah, in my case, I was probably eating like 4,000, 5,000 calories a day, but I certainly wasn't counting them because that was another unhealthy sign. Like calorie counting in the past had been very pathological or whatever for me. So I was like eating a lot of calories at the beginning of the process because that was what my body was telling me it wanted. And I ballooned up really fast. Like you can look back at old videos from 15 months ago and see a difference in my face, like a big difference in terms of the weight I was carrying. And now 15 months and a week or whatever later, it's coming off. And the thing about it, it was like relearning how to trust my body, which I think is so central to healing this feminine energy thing. I was trusting that my body is smarter than my brain when it comes to like knowing fucking like what to eat, right? Like I would just listen and try to really tune into the cravings. And then at a certain point, my body was telling me it didn't want that much food anymore. And so it was super easy and natural just to not eat that much. And for a while, I wanted to drink a lot of apple juice. And that was kind of interesting too, because I had a problem with binge drinking for years and years, like probably 14 years or something. Vipassana meditation eventually took that out of me. Like I've been totally sober for over 8 years. Is that right? 7 years, over 7 years now. And it's effortless. It's just like you don't know when it's going to happen, but sooner or later when you do Vipassana, it eventually releases stored trauma in your body. And so whatever it had been that was in me that was driving me to drink, driving me to use alcohol to like numb pain or whatever, it was just gone. And I like don't even think about it anymore. And that's super incredible. But anyway, when I used to heavily drink, a lot of times the next day I would severely crave apple juice specifically. And so I thought it was interesting that I really wanted apple juice a lot, like in the earlier days of this eating disorder recovery process. So I was drinking a lot of apple juice, and that was a lot of calories. And cool, like whatever, my body wanted that. And then at a certain point, I no longer really wanted apple juice anymore. And now I'm drinking like a green juice, and it's like a lot less calories and stuff, but I just feel like drinking it. Like I just listen to my body. And I still drink apple juice sometimes if I want to, whatever. When I was restricting for many years, I just had water with like low, like 0 calorie electrolyte mix or whatever. Anyway, so what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that what am I trying to say? So I arrive at this bed and breakfast in Detroit, and it's locked and it's late and whatever. I'm so tired. And I look on my phone, and I'm grateful to see that there actually was another hotel 4 minutes away, and I'd rented a car too. So that was helpful. So I call this hotel to see if they have vacancies, and they did. There was like a lot of ambient noise in the background whenever the hotel worker picked up the call. So then I drive over there and it's swarming with cops. And I saw the people that they were going out. They just looked like it was kids, like girls, young girls. Just seemed like it was very dramatic, but I didn't feel like unsafe or whatever. And I just got a room and went up to it. And it was a pretty beat up hotel. It was that same kind of interesting juxtaposition that I was just talking about, where a couple blocks away, things can be super different in Detroit. So that was hilarious. And then whatever, like I would think that, they would refund that night for me. And they were just such a pain in the ass about it, and they still haven't refunded that night for me, even though I had to pay for like a separate hotel. Very grateful that I had the money to do that, and blah blah blah. Yeah, it was just interesting because like this renovated bed and breakfast is run by a couple, and the husband was hanging out a lot during the day, and I talked to him, and he was friendly, and he seemed like a pretty smart guy and whatever. Talked to him about what was going on in the city and what he thought about the neighborhood I was looking at and all this stuff. He gave me an extensive tour of all the renovations they've done. It's really great that somebody came in and restored this beautiful old house. It's called the Frederick Stearns house. But like one day when I was coming down to breakfast or something, I heard a TV, and then when he's taking me on the tour, I see that he was like watching Fox News, and he made a comment a couple times about he didn't want to see in Detroit like what had happened in Chicago and New York, and I didn't know what that was supposed to mean. He also had never lived in either of those cities, as I understand. I lived in both of those cities for many years. And then once I saw the Fox News thing, it was like, oh fuck, this guy seems like a pretty smart guy. He's like listening to whatever these people who live in New York Don't all the Fox News analysts live in New York? I'm pretty sure they do. Or talking about how it's a shithole and you shouldn't move to it or whatever. Yeah, so it was just, that was interesting. And then also, I have never had an experience even remotely like that in New York or Chicago, where I was trying to go to an inn that I'd already paid for. The fucking owners lock me out and won't let me in. And then I have to go to another hotel that's like swarming with police. I mean, it was just the misinformation thing. And like a lot of that stuff is worse in Detroit, frankly. Like whatever that guy thought was quote unquote bad, a lot of those quote unquote bad elements are going to be more present in Detroit than they are in other major cities. Like that's just a reality. It's just interesting that somebody who seemed pretty smart in a lot of ways didn't understand that or whatever. So, I mean, it was one of those things where I think even though these people did a bad thing, frankly, I had to mostly deal with the wife to figure out about this refund. Not to belabor this, but she like lied about the information being on the website. She just was unethical and horrible to deal with. And she helped to show me that I shouldn't move to Detroit, basically. Related to that, the listing agent for the house that I liked the most was so difficult to deal with in every way. And I was really confused by it at first because I couldn't tell how much of it was like incompetence and how much of it was just like, I don't know, maybe she's just not used to dealing with out of state buyers or whatever. She didn't trust that I was a real person. She tried to charge me $500 just to view the house. Like she wrote up this document that stated that if I close on the house, I was going to have to pay her $495 because she allowed me to view it for whatever that would have been, like 30 minutes or something. I think she just didn't understand, even though I said this time and time again, that I did not want to hire her as an agent. I don't think she understood the document she was offering to me, but she was such a huge pain in the ass, man. That like that also showed me like it shouldn't be this hard to just view a house. I did eventually get to view the house that I expressly went there to see, and I did not pay any money for it. But it was just like, all right, like I should be listening to these signs from the universe instead of, it's like I struggle with this thing where, I mean, my experience of Earth is that it's a very dense, difficult place. And so far in this life, at least, especially, and I think this has been true in a bunch of past lives. So I've had to be hyper independent and be resourceful and fend for myself and that kind of narrative. And certainly resourcefulness and self-reliance are great qualities to develop. I hope that everyone develops those, women especially. But when you're on that wavelength, you keep running into more of it. And so, yeah, like I mentioned earlier, that past version of me would think like, okay, there's been a million obstacles. That just means I have to keep trying. And I have a good capacity to just keep going. I don't want to overly credit astrology for that or something, because it's a quality that I have embodied and whatever, I live it out and stuff, like, you know, whatever, I want to like give myself proper credit for it, blah, etc. But I also learned, I don't know a ton about astrology, but I know a fair amount, I guess, at this point. I'm just like a hobbyist. But my Mars is at 28 degrees of Scorpio, which apparently means that you have this tenacity. Years ago, I was reading Ronan Farrow's book about the research that he did into like sexual abuse against women and so forth. I was reading it, and his partner at that time was talking about how he was just like relentless. And I had the sense like, I think Ronan Farrow also has Mars in Scorpio. And I looked it up, and he did. And I think it was also like, I think the later degrees, like the anoretic degree is the 29th degree, and that's more unstable and difficult, I guess. And I think 28, which is what I have, Mars at 28 degrees of Scorpio, I think that's like very solidly tenacious. So I have that quality, and so it's cool. But when I was younger, especially, and less healed, I could very easily point that in the wrong direction and just keep going and going and going and trying to do this thing that like I was getting a million signs from the universe that I should just stop doing, that I should go another way. And yeah, it was like I was falling back into that patterning, or sort of revisiting this old prominent patterning in myself through this trip, because I haven't really been in that energy really since my body forced me to heal with the eating disorder recovery. I mean, it dates back to before I found the actual solution, because I tried a bunch of doctors. I tried stuff for years to figure out what was going on. No one could help me. Kayla Rose Kotecki on YouTube was the one who led me in the right direction. So thank God for like YouTube, because I mean, I'm not saying that, of course, medical doctors are important, but nobody knew about this. Like when I dived into it more so and spoke to other people who had recovered and who were supporting people going through recovery, One woman told me that a lot of recovery centers were actually fat phobic. They just try to get you, like, I was never severely underweight or anything like that. My understanding is that, according to this person, a lot of those centers will just try to get somebody who's anorexic to a healthy BMI, healthy quote unquote. And we know that BMI is bullshit anyway. And then you leave and, like, yeah, you're not like damaging your organs actively anymore or whatever, but you're still carrying a lot of the burden of the patterns of an eating disorder. I just wanted to be done. I didn't want to spend any more time in this life fucking like caring about my intake, going to bed still hungry, feeling fucking terrible because I used a scale, and scales are bullshit too. They really don't tell you anywhere near the whole story. I wanted to be free of all of that, and I am now. It's amazing. I mean, I'm still waiting for this excess weight to come off, but I'm not averse to that in the way that I used to be. The huge thing too is that I don't overeat or undereat now at all. Like in the past, I always had these, like a lot of people, these like binge and restrict cycles. So I'd be on a restrictive diet, and then after 3 weeks or 3 months or some amount of time, then I would binge. I would eat a ton of calories someday, and it would be often unhealthy calories, unhealthy, quote unquote. All foods are part of a healthy diet, but quote unquote junk food or something. And I just thought that that was how it goes. That's a thing that happens when you're on an overall healthy restrictive diet. And now that's not a thing. I don't even overeat by a few bites, and this weight's just naturally coming off. And yeah, that's another reason I really want to evangelize this, because I mean, I could not find much information out there about this, and it would have helped me so much if I'd known sooner. But yeah, so all that happened in Detroit. It was like, all right, I think I should listen to this. And I saw an old friend, like one of my good friends from college, and went to her house in the suburbs, and was just like, yeah, I'm not sure about this house. Like, this listing agent has been such a pain. It seems like I should be sure about this, right? If I'm going to do it. And I was closer to New York than I am when I'm in Portland, Oregon, where I'm staying right now. My heart's always been in New York. I lived there the longest of anywhere I've lived. Is that true? I think it is. Of the city. I was in California for a long time, but kind of like accidentally. Like, I didn't mean to end up in California for a lot of that period of time, and I just kept finding myself there through work stuff. New York's the city I've lived in the longest. I just think it's the best place for women that I've ever been, and it just feels so much better there. It feels easier to be creative there. But the idea of buying a place to live in New York just seemed like, yeah, fucking right. I don't have $2 million to spend on a house. Like, I assumed that it would be some situation like that. But I found out that you actually can still buy places in and around the first place that I lived in New York. So I first lived in Washington Heights. There are now places that you can buy in and around that area. If you go to the Bronx, like up further in the Bronx, I mean, you can literally find places for like literally $100,000. They're often unusual legal New York entities, HDFCs, which is like I think a New York specific thing. So there are caveats, and you have to figure out how you're going to fit in with like the requirements for a particular place. But it was just this good reminder that I should never assume that something is just going to be really difficult or impossible to the degree that I don't even look into it, because sometimes you do stuff. Sometimes you just research something a little bit, and it's like, oh, actually, this is a lot more achievable than I came into this assuming. So it's this great reminder. So yeah, since I was there in Detroit, so much closer to New York than I am on the West Coast, I figured like I should physically go to New York. And I tried to tune in too, to ask like the energies of the highest good what I should do. And the answer that came in right away was go to New York, like physically go to New York. And so I did. And yeah, as soon as I got there, it was just like, yep, this is where I feel the best. Like everything that I already knew, I was just experientially reminded of it. And I looked around and saw some places, and it just seemed like, yeah, this is doable. I don't need to come into this with this scarcity mindset that I need to close right away. It just made me feel more like, okay, I think I see the path. I think I know what to do. I'm aware of the astrology. This is like a rehearsal period that we're in right now, as outer planets are moving into new signs, but then they're going to be regressing at the end of 2025, and then they'll come back into their new signs for a long time in February 2026, I believe. So yeah, also knowing that, it kind of felt like that timing kind of makes sense. Like I could come back to Portland, try to work on finishing this movie script, this story, which seems really important to do. It feels like I need to do that. I've said this before, and it's fun to say this now so that there's like a recording of it in case it later happens. My sense is that I need to finish this script and then get it to this semi-famous actor slash filmmaker. His first initial is M. I used to talk about this openly on TikTok, and now I'm like more reticent, I guess. I'll share this, whatever. I think it's fun to talk about, and it'll be really fun if this ends up happening, that I talked about it in advance. I just found this person a while ago. I kind of vaguely knew who he was. I had just gotten kicked out of clown school in France, and I came back to Los Angeles. And I didn't have a place to live yet. I was looking for a film to see, and I read an interview with him about his film, and I thought he sounded like a nice person. That was the main reason I wanted to see his film. There was one other person in the theater, and it had opened wide, so it was on thousands of screens across the US. Because so few people went to see it, it was out of wide release like days later. So there was only this narrow period of time where I could have caught it in theaters. And like I said, I just came back from France. And it was about a Polish teenager who wanted to be a singer and had lost her father. And the main relationship in the film is with like a surrogate father who's a singer who helps her. I went back to wherever I was staying, like an Airbnb, and I watched an interview with this filmmaker on YouTube. And the interviewer asked him, like, why did you want to write a film about a young, like a Polish teenage girl? Because, I mean, there's so many stories that women write about men. So many stories are about men. It's unusual for a male filmmaker. It's less common, we'll say that, to make a film about a woman. And also, this dude's not Polish. And he started to answer, and you could see, I felt that I could see anyway, that he had this sort of intellectual reasoning for it. But I sensed that the real reason was something that maybe wasn't necessarily conscious for him. And I immediately started crying. Because I think it's the most recent past life that I've ever looked at, which I've talked about in other videos on here, was a past life where I was a Polish young woman who was a singer. The memory first came back to me probably like 14 or something like that. It was the first past life I was shown. And then I went to different practitioners who also saw this past life, and in some cases independently verified stuff that I had seen about it, which was interesting. One of them was this dude, Ainsley McLeod, who Oprah has interviewed, but he was like so much less talented than this woman, Taya Anderson, that I worked with for a long time to do past life regression stuff and a lot of other stuff. She had a lot of talents and could help in a lot of different ways. So anyway, yeah, it was this Polish past life, and I had my father with me, and I loved him very much. And he was also a performer. He encouraged me, and then he was killed by Nazis. And after that, I didn't feel that I could perform. Just something was shut down in me, and I couldn't do it. And then the Nazis later, like these two soldiers, like down like an embankment by a river. And also I saw my father killed it was like a wooded clearing. I was like peering through a fence, and he was killed by firing squad. And I blame myself for his death. It was like I was more visible because I was a performer, and I was like a conventionally pretty person or whatever, a blonde person in that life. So I carried that blame, that sense that it was my fault that he was killed. I think I've released a lot of that guilt. I realized as I just said that. Yeah, I just couldn't fulfill the mission in that life. And this is the trippiest part to say, but my sense is that if I had been able to do it, if I'd been able to continue performing to the highest level of my abilities, I could have been this internationally known singer and could have somehow shed light on what was going on, what the Nazis were doing sooner, so that it wouldn't have been as horrific as it was. But I couldn't do it because I was so destroyed after my father died. And his death, like that's the painful memory in that life. Like my death, it was like I was already dead, you know, like I was already just so shut down after he had died. And I didn't live that much longer afterward either, I don't think. I think I died when I was around 20 or something like that. Anyway, the reason I started crying when I saw this interview with this semi-famous filmmaker actor who directed this film and wrote this film was that I realized like he wrote this about a Polish teenager. He has no obvious connection in this life to Poland in any way, and it's about, you know, like this father and daughter finding each other so he can help her become this successful singer. I just got a chill as I said that. It was like he was writing a different ending for that life, but he wasn't conscious of it. He didn't know. But when I saw that YouTube video, I felt like I know. I now know it's him. Whew. I still feel pain and stuff when I look at some of this, but it's also the funnest thing to think about because the energy feels so much better when I look at what feels like memories from these times. And it seemed like a theme was that I was supposed to try and do something artistic at a bigger scale. And we tried different things. Like we tried in that life, in the Polish life, me being born to him as his child. So he was with me from the beginning and encouraging me. But he had to die still. So like I was too hobbled by his death. In another life where I was a painter, a male painter, and I think Crimea. I met him when we went to fight in the Crimean War, when I guess we were drafted. Or maybe we were just, I think he was poor and needed to fight. But my memory of that life was that I met him when we were in the service together. So we were already, like young adults, and we fell in love and had a homosexual relationship without having like the word for that. And I was this big dude and like was kind of celebrated as a big dude who was athletic and good at sports. People knew that I painted, but they didn't care so much about that. And it was like the through line of all these lives for me, including this one, seems to have been about this damage of this overemphasis on unhealthy masculine energy. So in that life, it was like I was a beneficiary of it in the sense that like people just liked me because I was a big dude who was good at sports, but it was unearned. That's not that's not enough to be celebrated or whatever. I was a beneficiary of that male privilege in that life, but I knew it wasn't right, and I knew those people couldn't really see me, and so I suffered because of that. I wasn't seen as an artist, and then also I was gay and fell in love with this guy, and like society didn't have any place for that. But then he died in the war. So in that life, the experiment was that I would come up and be a child before meeting him. It wasn't like the Polish life where I was born into his family and got to experience his love and encouragement from the beginning. So we tried that, meeting as young adults, and then him dying. Yeah, I couldn't do it then either. After he died, like I kept painting. I lived a long life, but I just couldn't fulfill, like the highest level of that mission. And then also significantly, there are a couple other lives I think that he seemed to be in, but he was there at the fall of Atlantis. And I don't think we had gender like we understand it today. He was sort of like whatever that time period's approximation was of like a masculine counterpart to my feminine counterpart. And he was there. This is the life that feels the most painful. But yeah, again, check out the video that I made about that whole story if you're interested, because it also includes like that trippy independent verification from a stranger who felt that she remembered me. But what I saw in this past life and what practitioners I worked with had seen was this idea that we helped the attackers because they wanted help. They came to us and asked for help. We didn't know what their real plan was. I was appointed like a spokesperson for my people to try and teach them things because they couldn't plug into our telepathic network. So therefore I saw what they were actually planning a little bit before the rest of my people did. And I tried to stop it. This was the trippiest piece, y'all. Okay, so like when this memory first came back in, I didn't understand this at all. But I tried to stop it by dissolving myself and putting my energy into the people to shift them enough. The idea was that this could shift them enough so that they wouldn't do the horrible thing that they were planning to do to destroy our civilization and suck our energy out through a portal. Like they misunderstood everything about how things worked there and destroyed it. So I did that. I dissolved myself and put my energy into them, and it didn't work, and a lot of people died. But that just sounded like the weirdest thing, and I didn't understand it. And like I said, watch that video if you're interested. But when I mentioned it to those people that I met, the strangers, they told me about something called a Merkaba that people were said to have in Atlantis that allowed you to dissolve yourself, to dissolve your energy. And that was just like, whoa, holy shit. So anyway, I think he was there with me then, and he saw me make that sacrifice. And I think I got good karma for it. In this life, I carried a lot of guilt about it not working for a long time. But I think I moved through a lot of that guilt. The extension of the mission in this life just seems to be about we have to get out of this economic system. And so seeds succeeding at scale so that people no longer have to work a job that they hate to get the money that we need to survive in modern times. You can just use seeds to ask for help instead. You can support people in need through seeds and have the potential to build wealth that way as well. That makes for a better, kinder economic ecosystem. And I think when a lot of us are free from having to work jobs that we hate, we're going to have more space for spiritual awakening and to heal and to do things like practicing Vipassana meditation. That's the future that Seeds is working toward. And this clown film that I'm trying to make, I think is part of that mission as well, because it seems like something is telling me to make it, right? So yeah, I left New York and just felt very clear that like, yeah, I'm supposed to come back here. I guess I'll go back to Portland now and write. If the energies are supporting this and it feels like they are, and I just need to kind of relax into it, like floating on a lake or something. That feels a lot like what feminine energy is. I think when it's healthy, it's like water. It's so incredible, and it can be so ferocious and wild. And also it just supports you if you relax into it. It can literally, carry you without you making any efforts whatsoever. And I think that's something I've really needed to learn and understand, and I need to embody. And I think that's true of like virtually all of us. And that's a big part of what it seems like I'm meant to try and share in this life through my own experience of learning these lessons for myself. I felt like I have a ton of masculine energy, unhealthy masculine energy. I think being a triple Aries in this life is a big part of that. But I also think I chose to come in with that energy signature in this life to have that much masculine energy and like that sort of associated hyper independence and tenacity, whatever, because in previous lives, I couldn't carry out the mission, right? In this life, those energies have helped me get up to this point. And it feels like I'll write this film, I'll get it to this filmmaker who has a production company, ask him to work on it with me. I think that's how I'll meet him. I think we will make this film, and hopefully it will reach a lot of people who have similar memories from that time. Even if they're not conscious of them, something about the film will seem familiar and help to wake something up in them. That's the idea. That's the hope with all of this. And I feel like that really is what is going to happen. So we'll see. We will see. I'm just going to trust that I'm going to take care of my part in things and keep meditating and keep trying to develop and heal my own shit and trust that, the larger thing that is happening and is meant to happen is carrying us, because maybe that's a lot, that trust of sort of natural order is a lot of what being in your feminine energy is anyway. So yeah, I think that's all I have to share today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you'd like to help someone in need and get seeds, cryptocurrency, and thanks, the link is in the description / the show notes. This is the second time that I've recorded this. I'm really glad I re-recorded it actually, because I'm in a much better channeling state, like a higher vibratory state. I feel like where sort of better things are coming through. Huh. Yeah. So that said, thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate you very much. And I'll talk to you next time. Okay. Bye bye.